Would you care for some of this Tarkalian tea? It's very good.
What a thoughtful young man. How nice that we've met.
Lunchmates or lovers? On January 11th, 1993, Star Trek Deep Space Nine introduced the first gay power couple of the 24th century.
May I introduce myself?
Garak and Bashir. One's a dashing young doctor, the other's a simple tailor who might also be a spy, and from the very moment they met, their chemistry was delicious.
Eat it.
Eat it.
Would these star-crossed lovers find their way into each other's arms on screen?
We're going to have a wonderful time.
The cast was ready to make it happen. The writers saw the possibilities, fans were clamoring for it, and on top of all that, everyone knew that Star Trek had a long history of challenging TV taboos, boldly breaking boundaries, and blazing a trail that other shows would eventually follow. With Garak and Bashir on DS9, Star Trek had a golden opportunity to be the first major franchise on TV to star a same-sex couple. So, did they boldly go where no one had gone before? Hey, I'm Matt, I make videos about pop culture, and this time we're looking at Star Trek's most popular gay couple that never was, and how fans finally got them together. Links to all the episodes I talk about in the video are in the description below, and also there's a link to my Patreon, where I'll be posting bonus videos with extra stories that didn't fit into the script. So who are Garak and Bashir? Were they ever meant to be on-screen lovers, and if so, who torpedoed their romance? Well, grab yourself a Romulan ale and brace for impact, as together we travel back through the history of Star Trek to unravel the mystery.
To many humans, a mystery is irresistible.
Now, you may not be familiar with Deep Space Nine, I assume because you prefer Babylon 5. But all you really need to know about it is it's the third live-action Star Trek series, following the original one in the 60s and Next Generation, which started in the late 80s. DS9 premiered in 1993, and it's set on a remote space station that kinda looks like a mall for aliens. For many years, the station had been occupied by the Cardassians, these gray bumpy guys, not to be confused with the Kardashians, but now they've all left. All but one. When DS9 starts, the station has just been handed over to Starfleet, which is kind of like the Navy. Starfleet sends a new doctor to the station, this guy, Julian Bashir, a handsome young physician who catches the eye of the only Cardassian who stayed behind.
My name is Garak.
Garak is introduced in the third episode of the first season. He's played by Andrew Robinson. Audiences might have seen him playing Liberace just a few years earlier.
I'm for anything that has the letters L-I-B in it, and that includes gay lib.
And Garak seems to be channeling some of Liberace's charisma when he approaches Bashir, introduces himself, and notes that as a Cardassian on the station, he's a bit of an outcast.
So, I do appreciate making new friends whenever I can.
Throughout this little meet-cute, there seems like there's something Garak's hinting at, but not saying. He delivers his lines like there's air quotes around everything, the way one might if they were testing the waters for a flirtation. No wonder Julian gets a little bashful and awkward.
You are new to this station, I believe.
I am, yes.
Despite his nerves, Bashir tries to make conversation.
Some people say that you remained on DS9 as the eyes and ears of your fellow Cardassians.
You're not intimating that I'm some sort of spy, are you?
Look at how Garak smiles when he says that. Garak is delighted by how bashful Bashir is. And then Garak drops an invite to hang out later at his clothing shop.
So if you should require any apparel, or simply wish, as I do, for a bit of enjoyable company now and then, I'm at your disposal, Doctor.
And then, just to make sure Bashir knows how interested he is...
Good day to you, Doctor. I'm so glad to have made such an interesting new friend today.
Now, on one hand, this scene is setting up an episode about intrigue and espionage, so it's natural that it would include dialogue with subtext and double meaning. Garak might just be hinting very strongly that he's a spy, or maybe he's a tailor who talks weird. But on the other hand, you really couldn't ask for a better example of a queer-coded performance than this. Even though there's nothing explicitly romantic about the lines, Andrew Robinson's made them flirty with eye contact and smiles and physical touch. That all adds a layer of meaning to this scene, in the same way that actors have been doing for decades. For example, here's Montgomery Clift, a gay actor, in 1948's Red River.
It's a good-looking gun you were about to use back there. Can I see it? Maybe you'd like to see mine. You know, there are only two things more beautiful than a good gun. A Swiss watch or a woman from anywhere. You ever had a good Swiss watch?
And check out this deleted scene from Spartacus.
Do you consider the eating of oysters to be moral and the eating of snails to be immoral?
No, Master.
Of course not. It is all a matter of taste, isn't it?
You see, when characters can't or won't talk about sex, often they talk around it instead. But when it comes to Garak and Bashir, is the gay subtext supposed to be there? Or am I just seeing it because I want it to be there? After all, by the early 90s, there had only been a handful of queer characters on TV. For Star Trek to start its new series with a same-sex flirtation would be an extremely bold choice. But then again, it might not be entirely out of place, given what the franchise had done before. Going all the way back to the 1960s, when Star Trek was created by Gene Roddenberry, the show has often been on the cutting edge of social progress. The original series wasn't always perfect, but it was also one of the first TV shows to feature an interracial cast, one of the only shows at the time employing women writers, and of course it featured one of the first interracial kisses on American television.
Gene Roddenberry felt that the Enterprise was a metaphor for Starship Earth, and the strength of this starship lay in its diversity.
Remember that idea, that Gene considered diversity a great strength, because it's gonna come back. To give you just a sense of how important the show's emphasis on diversity was at the time, listen to the story from Nichelle Nichols. She played Uhura, and when she was considering leaving the show halfway through its run, she was convinced to stay by Star Trek fan Martin Luther King Jr.
I said, well, I'm leaving Star Trek. He said, you cannot. You cannot. And he said, for the first time on television, we will be seen as we should be seen every day.
Dr. King told her that it was important to the real-life civil rights movement to have a TV show with black characters in positions of respect. Star Trek was doing something that few other shows had the courage to do, and might not again for a long time.
And he said, if you leave, Nichelle, Gene Roddenberry has opened a door for the world to see us. If you leave, that door can be closed.
The fact that Star Trek was so diverse in the 1960s gave hope to George Takei, who played Sulu. He was closeted back then, and he started to wonder if the show could include gay characters too. So he asked Gene, and to his surprise...
And he said, you know, you're right, I'd like to do that.
But there was a problem. Star Trek's interracial kiss had caused a huge backlash behind the scenes. NBC didn't want to air it at all. They even insisted that the show shoot an alternate version of the scene with no kiss. To his credit, William Shatner intentionally ruined the no-kiss takes by crossing his eyes throughout the scene, so NBC had to show the version with the kiss. And while that was a huge victory, it put the show in a dangerous place. It was already close to being canceled due to low ratings, and Gene told Takei that putting a sympathetic gay character on TV would likely have been the end of the show.
He said, I'm walking a tightrope. I've got to keep the show on, and that, as you say, may be a bridge too far.
As a result, Star Trek's original run had no queer characters. But what it did have were a few very close male friendships. And in the absence of queer storylines, fans started to fill in their own. Viewers started making amateur magazines called zines full of their own ardent stories, which they usually handed out at conventions or through mailing lists. Not all of them featured queer content, but a lot of them did, most often between Kirk and Spock. And this just happened to take place at a perfect time for zines, thanks to a machine called a mimeograph. It was like a smaller version of a printing press. It was like the precursor to modern photocopiers. Around the 1950s, mimeographs became cheaper and easier for regular folks to get, so suddenly a lot of people could print whatever they wanted. And that included fiction with same-sex characters. Lots of it. The genre became known as slash fiction, which was short for what was by far the most common coupling, Kirk/Spock. So if you wanted anything queer from Star Trek, you'd either have to turn to slash-fic zines, or else search for gay subtext in scenes like these.
Any chance of teaching me that body throw could come in handy sometime.
I don't know, sir. It isn't just physical, you know. You have to be inscrutable.
Inscrutable? Sulu, you're the most scrutable man I know.
But then, two huge things happened in 1986. Paramount announced a new series, Star Trek: The Next Generation. Queer fans were thrilled, and they formed a group called the Galaxians that wrote letters to Gene asking if this time they could finally get a gay character that they didn't have to imagine. After all, times had changed. A handful of shows had featured queer characters, and even couples, since the original series had ended. If Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart, and Cheers could do it, maybe it was time for Star Trek. But did Gene see it that way? Well, Star Trek writer David Gerrold was with him at a convention in 1986, and he remembers that someone from the Galaxians asked Gene point blank. To everyone's surprise, Gene said, "Yes, it is time. We should show gay people on board the Enterprise." In fact, according to Gerald, Gene even went to the show's other producers and explicitly told them to include gay characters. Gerald had written The Trouble with Tribbles and was gay himself, and he figured he'd give it a shot. So he wrote a script called Blood and Fire, where the crew encounters a blood-borne infection that Gerald meant to be a metaphor for HIV. He also wrote 2 male characters in the script, and when someone asks them, "How long have you two been together?" one of them says, "Since the Academy." That's it. Should be relatively uncontroversial. Except for some reason, it was. The script got axed, Gerald said, by producer Rick Berman. Rick was new to Star Trek. He said in interviews that he wasn't a fan of the original series, he was there to be a steady hand and protect the show from taking any unnecessary risks. And it became clear that he considered queer characters unnecessarily risky. According to Gerald, Berman said that they couldn't include gay characters because the show was on in the afternoon in some markets, and parents would write angry letters. Now remember, this was a franchise that was famously willing to risk controversy in the original run. When Gene put the interracial kiss on the air, they anticipated backlash, and they got plenty.
That show was literally blacked out in the South. Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia didn't air that. Our ratings plummeted.
So on one side, you had Gene, who had pushed the envelope as far as he felt he could in the 1960s. And now in the 80s, he wanted to push it again. He even told The Advocate in an interview, "Viewers will see more of shipboard life, including gay crew members in day-to-day circumstances." And on the other side, there was Rick Berman, who felt that it was too risky. And to complicate things, Gene was going through a lot of health and personal issues around this time.
Gene was beginning to phase out, and Rick was seizing power.
Gene's role in the show diminished, and his advisors started taking over. They took a very different approach to boldly going where no one had gone before. Here's writer Ira Stephen Bear describing Gene's vision for a pleasure planet called Risa in Season 3 of The Next Generation.
And he's very nice, but he says, "I like the idea of a pleasure planet. And I want it to be a place where you see women fondling and kissing other women, and men hugging and holding hands and kissing, and we could imply that they're having sex in the background."
Sounds like fun, but then
I go back to Rick. He goes, "Pay no attention to that."
Next Generation repeatedly avoided same-sex content. In Season 4, there's an episode where Beverly falls in love with a man who falls ill. When his consciousness is transferred to a woman, Beverly ends the relationship.
Perhaps someday our ability to love won't be so limited.
There's the episode in Season 5 where Commander Riker falls in love with a non-binary alien. Jonathan Frakes, who played Riker, wanted the show to cast a man to play his love interest, but they refused. Rick Berman said in an interview that showing 2 men kissing might have been a little unpalatable to viewers. And just to remind you, this is a franchise that made history by broadcasting a kiss that was unpalatable to many viewers. When asked about gay characters, Berman said that it would have been dishonest for them to show 2 gay men or lesbians holding hands, because they never show heterosexuals holding hands, which, sorry to get so nerdy, but holding hands is literally the beginning of both the Vulcan and Klingon mating rituals. And they had no problem showing whatever this is.
I did fall asleep reading a particularly erotic chapter in my grandmother's journal. I had no idea I could feel this way.
And it wasn't like heterosexual affection wasn't on full display.
Help me once again.
He's biting that female.
But, you know, gay characters holding hands would have been dishonest. For his part, Berman claims that Gene, quote, was very ambiguous about the idea of gay characters. We never really got around to coming up with a way of just adding a gay character. But remember, Gene was actually pretty unambiguous. Yes, it is time. We should show gay people on board the Enterprise. Viewers will see more of shipboard life, including gay crew members in day-to-day circumstances. Dave and Gerald even wrote a script with gay characters, but Berman said he wouldn't do it because he was afraid of angry letters. And Gerald's not alone. Other people who worked on the show had similar experiences. In 2002, Kate Mulgrew, who played Janeway on Voyager, said that she repeatedly asked them to add a regular gay character to the show, and that Rick Berman turned her down every time. In 2006, Star Trek writer Andy Mengels told After Elton, quote, "Berman was ultimately responsible for killing almost every pitch for gay characters," unquote. And that's not even the only complaint that people who worked on the show had about Berman. Terry Farrell, who played Dax on DS9, described how he would constantly criticize her breasts. Berman insisted that they put a hot Borg character on Voyager, and they made her wear a costume that was so tight she had to have oxygen administered and still passed out multiple times. And listen to Berman explain his thoughts on women in positions of power.
If you look at female officers in the military who make it to the rank of admiral or general, they tend to not be babes.
So that's who was calling the shots. By all accounts, Berman was just so concerned about protecting the show from taking any risks that viewers were just never going to get explicitly gay characters, unless someone could find a way around him. And that brings us to Deep Space Nine. DS9 was the follow-up to Next Generation, and when he was cast as Garak, Andrew Robinson started thinking about the character, who was only supposed to appear in one episode at first. He wondered why Garak would approach Bashir, and here's what he decided.
At first, he just wanted to have sex with him.
Robinson used the term omnisexual to describe Garak, which was very groundbreaking for 1993. Like the fans have been doing with Slashfic for 30 years, Robinson saw the potential for a same-sex relationship, or at least a flirtation, and he decided to go for it, even though it wasn't in the script. Robinson put his own twist onto the performances. He'd lock eyes with Bashir.
Really, Doctor? Must we always play this game?
He'd stand very close.
Well, if you've nothing to hide, then why not let me stay?
He'd deliver his lines in a way that it's clear that the subtext is more important than the actual words.
Just notice the details. They're scattered like crumbs all over this table we regularly share.
Garak and Bashir are so queer-coded that often they closely mirror queer-coded moments in other media.
Would you care for some of this Tarkalian tea? It's very good.
What a thoughtful young man.
Tea? Tea? Well, isn't it a small world, sir?
Fans loved it, and over the seasons, Garak and Bashir's relationship deepened. When Bashir leaves the station for a while, Garak's the first to welcome him back.
I've missed you. I've been genuinely concerned for your safety. Lunch hasn't been the same without you.
They give each other presents.
These are for you.
Delavian chocolates.
When Garak opens up to Bashir about an addiction that's slowly killing him, Bashir helps him overcome it, staying by his side until he's well again.
I'm not sure what else I can do for you.
Oh, you've done enough, Doctor.
They break out of prison together.
Now, if you'll excuse me, my dungeon awaits.
They go on a zany 60s spy mission.
What could possibly go wrong?
They fix each other's pants.
I'm afraid your pants won't be ready tomorrow after all.
They even tease one another about their looks.
Then how do you explain my boyish smile?
Not so boyish anymore, Doctor.
But even though Andrew Robinson said that he intended for Garak to be sexually attracted to Bashir at first, in the show's 7 years, romance is only ever a hint between them, never stated. Eventually, the writers gave Garak a female love interest.
There's something about Garak I find fascinating.
Yes, he has his moments.
And they started pairing Bashir less with Garak and more with O'Brien, a relationship that had none of Garak's flirty undertones. And eventually, Robinson said he had to drop the whole gay subtext because it just didn't work with the scripts. The series finale ends with Bashir and Garak parting ways.
You've been such a good friend. I'm going to miss our lunches together.
I'm sure we'll see each other again.
I'd like to think so. We live in uncertain times.
To be fair, in its 7-year run, DS9 did feature one same-sex kiss, but it wasn't between Garak and Bashir. It was between Dax and a guest character who appears in one episode and then never comes back. I have a whole separate video about that episode, which is good, but, well, here's DS9 producer and screenwriter Ira Stephen Bear speaking in 2019 about their one and only same-sex pairing.
One episode in 7 years, we could have done better.
Bear even goes on to confirm what so many fans already knew.
Garak was clearly gay. I mean, everyone knew it, and we never played it.
And he talks about how they should have handled it differently starting in season 2, when Garak was made a recurring character.
We should have had Garak come out to Bashir as a gay Cardassian. Garak comes out as gay in season 2. We have 5 seasons to play that Bashir-Garak relationship. Where that would have gone, who the hell knows, but it could have been so cool.
One of the things that makes Star Trek, aside from the cute scants, is the dream of humanity at its best, the belief that humans can be bold and forge a path to a better future. But by all accounts, Rick Berman created a climate where bold moves were considered too risky, and queer characters or stories just weren't welcome. It's impossible to know for sure all the things that happened behind the scenes, but there's a lot that we do know, including that Garak and Bashir presented an opportunity to sustain Gene's dream of a future where diversity is a strength. But instead, that opportunity got squandered over concern about a few letters and hypocritical justifications about dishonesty. But that's not the end of the story for Garak and Bashir, because even though they never got to realize their flirtation in the show's original run, the relationship continued in an unexpected form. As it became clear that the romance wasn't going to happen on screen, fans knew what to do. They'd been here before, and they got to work on the next generation of slash fiction. In the mid-90s, there was an entire subgenre of sexy Garak Bashir zines. And just like how the mimeograph came along just in time to boost Kirk and Spock slash, Garak Bashir just happened to coincide with another technological leap: the internet. The early Garak Bashir zines gradually moved online to early forums like Usenet, and shout out to all my friends from rec.arts.startrek.current. The old term slash gradually got replaced by a new term, relationshipping, later shortened to just shipping. This wasn't all focused on Garak and Bashir. The first use of the term shipping was in an X-Files newsgroup, and pretty much every fandom picked up its own batch of shippers. Over time, the stories and art gradually moved to fanfiction.net in the late 90s, then 10 years later to Archive of Our Own, which started in 2008. AO3 now hosts over 7 million works, including several thousand featuring Garak and Bashir. Not bad, considering the show ended 9 years before AO3 even launched. So that's one way that the Garak Bashir ship sails on, but it's not the only one. Because all that fanfic has fans of its own, and among those fans are some of the cast of the shows. Here's Alexander Siddig, who played Bashir, talking about the shipping of Garak and Bashir in 2020.
Now with people being more expressive about their identity and being gay, being okay, finally, and all those sort of things, that has lent real credence to the Bashir-Garak relationship, because obviously there was I would say implied intimacy, but not intimacy, no, more love between them.
Now, while it's encouraging to see fans stepping up to do what the showrunners wouldn't, their stories aren't officially canon. Except sometimes they are. There's one piece of fanfic that did become canon, and that's a story written by Andrew Robinson himself. When he was preparing for the role in the early 90s, he started writing his own stories about Garak, and then he kept writing more, and then he started reading his stories at conventions just like countless fans have been doing with their stories for decades. Eventually, the publishers of the Star Trek novels found out about this, and they liked them so much that they published Robinson's stories as an official Star Trek novel. The framing device of the novel? The whole thing is a letter to Dr. Bashir.
My dear Doctor, forgive my delay in responding to your kind communications.
Fanworks have become a crucial part of Star Trek, to the point that later episodes showed crew members creating fanfic of their own.
Access his interpersonal subroutines, familial characters. Delete the wife.
And today, it's not unheard of for people who were involved with the franchise in an official capacity to team up with fans on projects. Remember that script that David Gerrold wrote for The Next Generation, the one with the same-sex couple? Well, a few years ago, the episode finally got made by fans, with David directing. And last year, something similar happened with Garak and Bashir. Siddig had been in touch with a fanfic writer whose work he liked, one thing led to another, and soon he and his former castmates started gathering online to read fan-created scripts.
We're just continuing, the stories that people loved, but this time written by fans who love the stories.
That's how Garak and Bashir reunited for Little Achievements, a fan-written story that takes place 20 years after the events of DS9. In Little Achievements, Bashir has traveled to a conference to accept an award, and Garak calls to congratulate him. They talk about the things they're proud of in their lives, and Garak suggests that one of Bashir's greatest achievements is
making a grouchy old Cardassian feel exceptionally loved.
Bashir replies,
"If anything, the biggest success in my life is somehow keeping you around all these years."
When they're interrupted by another call,
"What must I give you to have a decent, uninterrupted conversation with my husband?"
And the story ends,
"Come home to me, my dear."
I'll be there soon, Elaine.
It's a shame that the show never got around to acknowledging the chemistry of these two characters. But in that vacuum, fans stepped up to fulfill the potential, not only of the characters, but also of Gene's original vision. Countless fans were inspired by Star Trek's mission to envision a better, more diverse future, to show people as they should be seen every day. And it's beautiful to see those fans supported by the writers and actors who saw the potential for their shows, even when those in control couldn't. Now, to be fair to Rick Berman, he took over the franchise at a very chaotic time. For all of Gene's visionary ideas, he wasn't infallible, and The Next Generation notoriously struggled for its first 2 years, even before Gene's health really started to decline. According to Brent Spiner, who played Data, Berman did what he could to protect Gene's vision while also keeping the show on the air. If he hadn't come along, Star Trek might have just ended in the 80s. As it was, after DS9 ended, Berman stuck around to produce Voyager, then he co-created Enterprise. Viewers' interest, to put it mildly, declined during this time, and in 2005, Berman left the franchise. Then after a cinematic reboot, a new team came in to create something new. Star Trek Discovery, co-created by Brian Fuller, a gay writer and producer who started his career writing for Deep Space Nine. Fuller's had a complicated relationship with Star Trek, coming and going from the franchise over the years, but he laid a very different foundation for Discovery than anything that had come before. Among the innovations, a same-sex couple featured from the very first season. Played by Anthony Rapp, who originated the role of Mark in the musical Rent and played the character on Broadway and in the movie, and Wilson Cruz, who played the groundbreaking queer character Ricky Vasquez on My So-Called Life and also starred in Rent in the role of Angel. In Season 2, queer comedian Tig Notaro joined the cast of Discovery, playing an engineer who talks about her wife, and in Season 3, Star Trek's first non-binary and trans characters, played by a non-binary actor, Blue Del Barrio, and transgender actor, Ian Alexander.
Well, keep practicing.
Meanwhile, remember Seven of Nine, the hot Borg from Voyager who had to wear costumes so tight that actress Jerry Ryan passed out on set? Well, she's been brought back on Picard, and she tweeted recently that the character is canonically bi. Also, remember what Berman said back in the 90s, that it was too hard to put queer characters on the show, that it would have been dishonest to show same-sex couples holding hands? Well, here's what Seven of Nine is up to at the end of Season 1 of Picard.
Nothing but blue sky.
What do you know, turns out putting queer characters in Star Trek wasn't that hard after all. It makes sense that fans saw the potential in Garak and Bashir, and that fans were so motivated to see those characters reach their full potential. Because something that's always drawn people to Star Trek was Gene's philosophy of a better future, that through diversity we can become our best selves. It's a philosophy that's been inspiring millions of people for generations, something that Gene boiled down to a simple idea: infinite diversity in infinite combinations.
The glory of creation is in its infinite diversity.
And the ways our differences combine to create meaning and beauty.
Now, I have lots more to say about Star Trek, and in the process of working on this video, I dug up a lot of great stories that I just didn't have room for in this script, like how Whoopi Goldberg tried to make Star Trek more gay, and what happened when William Shatner was asked his opinion of all those Kirk/Spock stories. So if you want to hear about that, I'll be posting them in bonus videos over on my Patreon. And go subscribe to my newsletter at mattbaum.com for sneak peeks at what I'm working on next. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a date with a tall drink of water.